Hello and welcome to Daily News Simplified, the what, why, and how of the newspaper analysis from the civil service examinations perspective. So, today we are going to discuss the Hindu Daily edition dated 24th July 2023. The important topics which are to be discussed have been displayed on your screen, and a timestamping of the same has been provided in the description box below. So, now let us begin our today's session. This topic has appeared at page number 12. This topic is in relation to the recent floods, landslides, landslips in various regions across India. As you can see here, this news is particularly dealing with the J&K region, and this news is basically dealing with the Raigad region in Maharashtra. So basically, Western Ghats, Himalayas, as well as the riverine plains of India are hit by continuous disasters in these seasons. So in the DNS as shown on your screen, you can go to this DNS to understand that how the Himalayan region is vulnerable to multiple disasters. To understand that, you can click on the link given below in the description also and try to understand that how various disasters are associated with each other particularly in the Himalayan region. However, in today's session, what we are going to learn is about the early warning system. So what do you know about early warning system? Just think about it, and what does this name suggest us? When it comes to the UPSC scheme of syllabus, this topic finds its relevance in the General Studies Mains Paper 3 in the section of disaster management. So why do we have the early warning system? First, this is the basic question. So as the name is suggesting you, basically this is used in the case of disasters to transmit the relevant informations to all the stakeholders which are there in that particular region. This system basically acts as the early warning. So that means that this information is during the pre-disaster phase as well as during the disasters phase. And what will be the main aim of this information system? It is basically to transmit or disseminate important knowledge so as to reduce the losses in terms of lives as well as property. When it comes to the early warning system, nowadays the government across the world are focusing on the multi-hazard early warning system. So now how multi-hazard early warning system is different from the traditional or the conventional single hazard oriented early warning system. To understand this, first let us see that how various hazards are related to each other. So this we are going to understand with the help of two examples. First, let us imagine that this is a mountainous slope. This is the transition boundary, and this is basically the plain region. So in these mountains, let us imagine that this was the river which was flowing towards the plains, right? At this particular region, there is an abrupt slope break. So as soon as the river moves from this region towards the plains, because of reduction in this slope, this gradient, here we are having the horizontal plane, here we were having the gradient. As soon as the river enters from this gradient slope towards relatively planar slopes, there is a marked reduction in the velocity, and hence the river will flow in the lateral direction and thereby leading to floods, right? So we know this. Now let us understand that how various disasters are associated. Let us imagine that there was a cloudburst. So one disaster is the cloudburst. And because we all know that Indian monsoon is going very erratic, which can further lead to high intensity torrential rainfall. So as soon as the intensity of the rainfall because of this cloudburst or the erratic monsoon increases, the flow, the volume of the water in these rivers will also increase. That means the velocity will increase. This higher velocity of river will in turn lead to soil erosion. Second disaster. This was the first. This is second disaster. As soon as there is soil erosion, there can be huge amount of landslides as well as landslips. Right? Now let us assume that at this particular point we had a dam. So this was the reservoir of that dam. So all that volume of the upstream river is going to be collected in this reservoir, which in turn will increase the pressure, and hence to reduce that pressure the gates of the dams must have to be released, which in turn will further intensify the floods in the downstream area. So these landslides or landslides were the third disaster. Fourth is the floods, right? There can be an issue of the dam failure also, leading to the fifth disaster. Similarly, on the upper reaches, there might be a glacial lake also. And if it bursts, we call it as the glacial lake outburst flood. That is the sixth disaster. So, are you understanding that just there was the first trigger point, which was the cloud burst, and how subsequently it has led to glacial lake outburst floods, soil erosion, landslides, floods, dam failure, etc. Similarly, now let us come to this example. So, we all know that the eastern coast of India is highly vulnerable to cyclones. So, let us say that Bay of Bengal, there was a cyclone which got developed in this region, and it eventually moved towards the eastern coast of India. So, one disaster is cyclone. Second disaster will be the landfall which it will lead on the coastal areas. Because of this landfall, there can be cyclone induced floods, which we call as cyclonic floods. So again, these cyclones in the deep oceans has led to landfalls, has led to cyclonic floods in this region. High intensity winds can generate storms also. Again, one particular disaster leading to several other disasters. There can be huge amount of coastal erosion, right? It can further lead to coral destruction, coral bleaching, etc. Similarly, in the coastal areas, there can be a huge scale destruction of mangroves. So, are you getting it that how one disaster is particularly leading to multiple different disasters? Now, let us imagine the role of early warning system. So now let us try to understand this with an hypothetical example. Let us see that the early warning system was of a unidimensional nature, that is related to just one hazard, let's say tropical cyclone. So it might happen that because of this system in place in relation to tropical cyclone, it disseminated the relevant information to all the stakeholders during 1 month. But because it was not able to witness that how this tropical cyclone will change its nature in terms of disasters on the land, leading to coastal erosion, mangrove destruction, coral bleaching, cyclonic floods, landfalls, high intensity winds, etc. And that is why we need to have multi-hazard early warning system, because early warning system restricted to one disaster may help us to avoid the immediate destruction caused by tropical cyclone, but the disaster, for example the coral bleaching, which is going to take place in longer duration, mangrove destruction, storms, etc., might not be taken into account by the EWS related to one disaster, and hence there arises a need or the concept of multi-hazard early warning system. That is, we need to have such system which can disseminate all the relevant information to the stakeholders related to all the possible disasters which can be linked to the generation of one disaster, and that is why we call it as the cascading effect. So multi-hazard early warning system basically deals with this cascading effect. Let us understand that what are the key components of multi-hazard early warning system. So the first and the foremost component is the disaster risk knowledge. The things which we have understood here with the help of these diagrams. So multi-hazard early warning system must also have the adequate knowledge of the disaster risk. Now, what do we mean by disaster risk? What is the knowledge that how this disaster is being created? What is the magnitude of this disaster? What can be the intensity or the impact of this disaster? What can be other disasters which can be linked to this particular disaster, that is the cascading effect? Which are the regions which are most vulnerable to this type of disasters? What can be the potential losses in terms of lives as well as property? So, all these things are related to the disaster risk knowledge. So, that is why this becomes the first component of the multi hazard early warning system. Then comes the observation, monitoring, analysis, and forecasting. Once this system has gathered the adequate disaster risk knowledge, then it has to be processed. And this processing must be on the real time basis, because only then the early warning system will be able to transmit the knowledge to the relevant stakeholders. It will be of no use that the system has forecasted that after 10 days there will be a tropical cyclone, but that system, if it is not able to monitor it on the real time basis, because we know that tropical cyclones are known to change their paths. It might happen that earlier, let's say the city of Andhra Pradesh was the most vulnerable 15 days earlier. But during this span, the tropical cyclone changed its paths towards the state of Odisha. It might happen. So that is why the real time based monitoring is very important. So hence this is the second important component. Then comes the warning, dissemination, and communication. Once the system is aware about the fact that how a particular disaster is behaving, then comes the knowledge dissemination and communication to all the stakeholders, that what should be the steps which must be taken by the relevant agencies, communities, voluntary organizations, etc. And the last component is preparedness and response capabilities, which is basically focused towards the long term steps which must be taken. Similarly, if you see all these circles which are drawn, basically it has three stages. The innermost circle deal with the operations as well as the development of the EWS, that is the early warning systems. And the outermost circle is of the partnership. Without adequate partnership, these early warning systems cannot work. Now, what do we understand by partnerships? Whose partnerships are important? For example, there are various organizations. Let's say one organization is dealing with earthquake. The second organization is dealing with floods. The third organization is dealing with monsoon. Now, because we know that all these disasters are related to each other and can have a cascading effect, therefore, all the organizations dealing with these specific disasters must have partnership. There has to be sharing of information, sharing of data. Similarly, the disasters knows no geographical boundaries, and hence if there are floods in the upstream countries, let's say Nepal, it can have a devastating impact on the downstream states like India. So therefore the partnerships not only should be at the domestic level, but it should also be there at the international level. And that is why you people might have heard about the Sendai framework. So the Sendai framework basically set 7 goals for the world. And these goals were to be achieved by 2030. So let us see that what were the goals. First was the reduction of the global disaster mortality. Second, reduction of the number of affected people globally. Reducing the direct economic loss in relation to the GDP because of these disasters. Fourth was reducing the disaster damage to critical infrastructure and disruption of the basic services. Now, these were substantial reductions which were aimed by the Sendai framework. On the other hand, there were substantial increases also which Sendai framework envisioned. For example, increasing the availability and access to multi-hazard early warning systems. And here you can see that how Sendai framework has also focused on the multi-hazard early warning system, thereby bringing the importance of international partnerships, international cooperations. The other two remaining increases were the substantial enhancing of the international cooperation to the developing countries, as well as increasing the number of countries with national and local disaster risk reduction strategies. In this very line, it is also very important to know the fact that United Nations Office for Disaster Risk Reduction, as well as the World Meteorological Organization, along with other international and national agencies, has established International Network for Multi-Hazard Early Warning Systems. So this information can be important from the PLIMS perspective also. This network is basically established by United Nations as well as World Meteorological Organizations in cooperation with other national and international agencies. So in this session we have learnt about the basics of multi-hazard early warning systems. What are the 7 goals by the Sendai framework, and is there any goal related to the development of multi-hazard early warning systems? We have also understood that disaster, or more specifically natural disaster, are not isolated. There can be a cascading effect of all these natural disasters, and hence no particular region is disaster proof. The only thing is that that region will be vulnerable to some other type of disasters, and hence the disasters can change their form also. They can divert towards another region also, which we understood from the help of Andhra and Odisha examples. So this was all about this topic. This topic has appeared at text and the context page. The topic reads on ED's power to arrest and seek custody. The immediate context of this topic is that the Tamil Nadu minister has challenged a Madras High Court order which had upholded his arrest by Enforcement Directorate in a money laundering case. This context is not relevant from the examinations perspective, but what is relevant is that we should be aware about the mandate of ED. We all know that ED stands for Enforcement Directorate. So from the examinations perspective, we should be aware that what is its mandate, under which acts or laws it derives its power, what are the challenges which are faced by Enforcement Directorate as an investigating body, as well as the way ahead or suggestions which can be written in the answer. So first we should look at the important acts which is the mandate of ED. So first is the Prevention of Money Laundering Act 2002 PMLA, which basically deals with the cases of money laundering, and ED has the power in it. Second is the Foreign Exchange Management Act 1999. Then is the Fugitive Economic Offenders Act 2018. So who are fugitive economic offenders? Basically those offenders who leave India and they run to the foreign countries in order to bypass the persecution and conviction. There is a certain threshold also that beyond which, if there lies the economic fraud, only then he or she can be declared as a fugitive economic offenders. That will come under that act. However, from this topic perspective, the mandate of ED also covers this particular act, which was framed in 2018. You might remember the cases involving Vijay Mallya, Nirav Modi, etc. So that point of time, so many individuals after committing economic frauds in India, they ran from India to the other countries. And the last is Conservation of Foreign Exchange and Prevention of Smugglings Act 1974. So these are the primary 4 acts which are the mandate of ED. Now these acts are relevant from the prelims perspective as well as from the mains perspective. Now going forward, let us look at that what are the major challenges which are faced by ED. So as we understood that ED is mainly involved with the economic frauds as well as foreign exchange and smuggling, and therefore the first and the foremost challenge which ED faces is the complex and sophisticated crimes. So as we all know that today we are in the age of internet revolution, technology upgradations, and we are aware about the new forms of currency, for example cryptocurrency, which are based on the blockchain technology ensuring almost anonymity. So in the backdrop of rising such technologies, also for example the dark web, so such technologies upgradation makes it very difficult for the enforcement directorate, or for that matter any institution, to deal with such highly sophisticated crimes. The second important challenge is of lack of international cooperation. So this can be understood that when we discussed here the examples of Vijay Mallya, Nirav Modi, that is fugitive economic offenders. So in order to deal with those people who are committing crime in one country and then running to the other country, obviously there has to be efficient international cooperation. The law enforcement agencies in those countries must be there to cooperate with the enforcement directorate. But the issue is that several laws, several acts come in contradiction to each other, and because of which the international cooperation many times are not being able to ensure. The third issue is the capacity and resources. Again, the matters dealing to lower levels of technology, finance, skilled workforce. So, all these challenges further hinder the efficient functioning of the Enforcement Directorate. Further, this organization also face a very huge, tremendous political pressure, because of which many a times allegations have also been used against this organization, and further this leads to a challenge of credibility. And the last challenge is the overlapping jurisdictions. So this overlapping jurisdiction with other agencies like Central Bureau of Investigation, CBI, NIA, etc. Many a times this comes in conflict with the mandate of the ED also, and therefore the interagency coordination also becomes difficult. So these are certain challenges which can help you to write as points in your answers. In these lines, let us also look at the suggestions which can be written. So first will be obviously investing in upgradation of technology, ensuring adequate movement of funds, as well as skill upgradation of the workforce. The second is the efficient data as well as information sharing among all the agencies. These agencies are at the domestic level as well as at the international level. Further, in order to enhance the efficiency of the prosecution and conviction, the special fast track courts can be established for the economic frauds for faster disposal. Also, adequate protection to the whistleblower must be given because they form the bedrock for any investigation agency. And if the whistleblowers do not have confidence in the system, then obviously all the evidences, all the proofs will be erased. So, special protection to the whistleblowers must be given. Further, bilateral as well as regional international cooperation can go a long way in tackling the challenges which involve financial and transnational crimes. So these are certain points in the forms of challenges as well as solutions and mandates of ED, which is relevant from this news article from the perspective of civil services examination. This topic has appeared at page number 6. The topic reads Downhill Driving. Now, this topic is in the context of the recent issues which have been faced in our international trade. And this is the very immediate context of this topic that recently the trade volume of India has shrunken. So, in this very regard, in this article, there are a lot of data which have been presented. From the examination's perspective, these data are not very important until and unless there is a general trend of either increase or decrease in the trade of India for the last 5 years or 10 years. Now, this is a very temporary phenomena. However, from this perspective, two important things emerge. From the parent's perspective, we should be aware about the concept of the balance of payment, as well as from the main's perspective, we should be aware about the solutions which we have to provide in our answers in order to boost India's trade. So in this session, this is going to be our main focus. But before arriving it, let us just in brief revise the concept of the balance of payment, that what is exactly meant by BOP and what is BOP crisis. So basically, first of all, the balance of payment, also known as BOP, refers to the transactions in goods, services, and assets between the residents of the country. Now, this word is very important, between the residents of a country and with the rest of the world. So, for example, let's say a US citizen came to India for a certain number of days. he fulfilled that threshold according to which he can be considered as a resident of India, still not the citizen of India. So there is a difference between residents and citizens, right? So this person who was a citizen of US is now a resident of India. So let's say if he has entered into any trade with the US citizen residing in US, that is the rest of the world, that will be the part of the balance of payment. Are you getting it? The person should be a resident of India. It does not matter that what is his or her citizenship. If any Indian resident, that can be Indian citizen or that might not be the Indian citizen, if any Indian resident is entering into trade with rest of the world, that part will be considered under the balance of payment, right? So I hope we know this thing. Now balance of payment has two important components. One is the current account part, second is the capital account part, again very basic thing. In current account part, we have the balance of trade, balance of services and transfer payments. These two components are the invisible components. Trade is the visible component. So basically when India exports or import any, let's say, good item, that will be the part of trade. If that export or import is being done for the service sector, then it will be services and transfer payments. For example, if any grant is provided by any country to India, or India provides the grant to any other country, right? So if I am saying that we are having a trade surplus, so that means our export of goods is more than the import, right? And hence we are earning. If I am saying that there is a trade deficit, that means we are importing more goods, hence sending out the dollars, right? So that will be deficit. In the capital account, all those things come which act as a liability. For example, the investments in terms of FDI, FII, external commercial borrowings, loans, deposits, etc. Right. So this is the basics of balance of payment. So I hope we know this. But from this article's perspective, if it is signaling a challenge that there has been a dip in India's trade volumes, so it becomes important for the aspirants to understand that what can be a way ahead. So there can be number of solutions which India should focus on to increase our trade volumes. The first and the most important one is technological upgradation. We all know that today we are living in the era of Industrial Revolution 4.0. Regularly in newspapers, we come across the terms like Internet of Things, artificial intelligence, quantum computing, etc. And today's manufacturing is becoming automated. And therefore, to tap the true potential of this automation, India must invest in technology. Second, India should also lead certain governance oriented reforms. For example, not the incremental approach but evidence based policy formulation must be focused. Management information systems should be strengthened, and investment promotion agency must be supplied with adequate resources so that it can promote, it can sustain and significantly increase India's brand value. Special focus should be given to the champion sectors because they are the core of any economy and they have huge potential with them. For example, infrastructure sector. So they have very huge potential and they form the core, the back root of the economic development. Now, value chain. What do you understand by value chain? Because this is our fourth suggestion. So India must invest in value chains. By value chains, we mean, let us understand this with an example. So let us say we have three regions: US, Europe, and India. And India was, let's say, exporting certain food product. Okay, let's say rice. So rice was having certain value in India, let's say X. It was then exported to Europe, and Europe was to package this rice material. That means the packaging was done in Europe. So when the packaging is increased, then the value of rice will increase, that is X plus Y, right? When now this packaged rice will move towards US, and then it will invest, let's say, in branding of this product. So now it will be X plus Y plus Z. So are you seeing that the value which initially was X of the same product, in reaching different regions, it is becoming plus Y plus Z. That is, the value is increasing. These are known as value chains, and that is why India should invest in value chains. That packaging, branding, promotion, all should be there in India only. Similarly, India must also focus on WTO reforms. For example, the WTO dispute resolution mechanism. We all know whenever it comes to the international trade, so WTO is the only multilateral organization which frames the rules for the international trade. And therefore, we cannot allow the dominance of any particular country or any particular region, because then all the rules might be framed according to their interests. And therefore, we must invest in WTO reforms. Similarly, not just the multilateralism, but India should also tap the potential of the regional trade agreements, FTAs, etc. Last, India must invest in research and development, as well as India must work to increase the investment. This investment must come from the domestic as well as from the foreign sources. And for this, India should invest in ease of doing business. So these are certain solutions which can be adopted to address the issue that why India is not able to tap its trade potential. So this was a very brief topic which has appeared in today's newspaper.